Hello everyone, this is video 2 on how I went about producing this Krenov style cabinet. It's based on the article in the Fine Woodworking magazine, issue 208. I did some slight modifications to the featured cabinet in the issue, like replace the glass on the doors with bird's eye Huon Pine panels.
Now back to the jig. The first thing I do is position the 50mm square leg blank on the jig. Then I screw the stop blocks on both ends of the leg. I clamp the first one in place and put two countersunk screws to hold it in place, and the same with the other side. I then screw on the third stop block, which goes down half the length of the leg with three countersunk screws. I will be using three toggle clamps to hold the piece down on the router table. I position them one on each end and one in the middle. I put a block under each toggle clamp so I have more meat to screw down onto. The plywood is only 19mm thick, which means if I didn't use these blocks, there would only be 4 15mm screws holding down each toggle clamp. With these blocks in place, I can use 4 35mm screws. There are 6 screws holding down the blocks onto the ply. With the toggle clamps in place, the jig is complete. We can now start cutting on the bandsaw and the router table. But before we can start cutting, we need to mark the piece. I use the pencil to work out which sides need to be cut depending on where the leg is on the cabinet. The legs flare out on the 4 sides of the cabinet, so we need to be careful how the flares go. I nearly put the top of the leg on the bottom of the jig. You need to be careful that the top of the leg sits on top of the jig. Once the piece is clamped in place, we then mark out the cut. Rather than take all the timber off of the router, I will remove the bulk with a bandsaw. The leg actually curves in 2 axes, so we need to do 2 cuts. I then use the bandsaw to take off as much timber as possible. It's a lot quicker removing the timber with the bandsaw compared to the router. We can finally put the jig onto the router to shape the leg. I only have a 50mm straight bit with a bearing on the bottom, so we will need to do 2 passes to finish the leg. This is the first pass. After doing the first axis, we then rotate the piece around 90 degrees to do the second axis. I then put the leg through again out of the jig to complete the cut. The camera ran out of batteries, which is why I can't show you this part. Once we have shaped the legs on the router table, I then use a spoke shave to take out all the machining marks. This reduces the sanding time by at least half. This is what the legs look like once they've all been shaped. Can you see how the legs are all flared out? We can now drill the holes for the dowels. I tried to put 2 legs onto the jig at the one time but couldn't because the legs flared into each other. That means I can only do 1 leg at a time. Again, drilling the holes is pretty straightforward, so I won't bore you with the details. After the holes have been drilled, I then use a 1/4 inch roundover bit on a small hand trimmer to round over the legs, but stop about 3 inches from where the rails start. We'll round over that bit once the rails have been glued in place. I then give the legs a good sand up to 240 grit sandpaper, starting at 80 to 120 to 180, then to 240 grit. It's easier sanding them now as legs rather than after they've been glued into place with the rails. Next video is finishing off the base of the cabinet. Remember, if you like this video, like us on Facebook. You can find us by searching Timberbits or hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Thank you.